The Philippines is a maritime archipelagic nation. The Philippines' exclusive economic zone covers an estimated 2.2 million square kilometers of water. In the West Philippine Sea, an estimated $3.3 trillion of trade passes annually. We sit with thought leaders who will give us their perspective on the law of the sea. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno, and this is The Way Forward. J. Batong Bakal worked extensively on maritime affairs since 1997. Dr. Batong Bakal was legal advisor to the Philippine delegation that successfully pursued the Philippines' claim to a continental shelf beyond 200 nautical miles in the Benham Rise region before the Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf in accordance with the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS. He has been included among the UNESCO IOC list of experts for UNCLOS Annex 8 Special Arbitration on Marine Scientific Research. Professor J, welcome to The Way Forward.
Thank you, Karen. I'm happy to be here.
What can you say about the recent events involving conflicts between the Philippines and China in the West Philippine Sea?
And I would say that the recent events really are of concern because they represent the most incremental escalation on the part of China, which indicates that they're really trying to tighten their control around the South China Sea and what we call the West Philippine Sea.
Would you say that filing claims in international tribunals is an effective strategy in order to claim our rights in the West Philippine Sea?
You see, the use of these international tribunals to assert our rights in international law is a way of gaining leverage, especially moral and political leverage, which is very important in international relations. So we really should keep that in mind, that although we won the case against China in 2016, we still have quite a ways to go.
In 2012, you were involved in advising the Philippine delegation to establish our claim in Benham Rise. Was there an improvement in terms of the Philippines having exclusive sovereignty in that area after you were able to get a favorable ruling?
Well, the claim to Benham Rise was a claim to sovereign rights of a large area of the seabed, just as big as Luzon, actually, in terms of its area. And this claim was submitted and processed in accordance with the procedures laid down in UNCLOS. And it was validated by the Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf. And since that time, no other country has laid any kind of claim as well to that area. And even China was forced to recognize the Philippines' exclusive rights to that area back in 2017 when it came into the news.
Professor J, how would you compare then the results from that 2012 ruling compared to the 2016 arbitral award in The Hague with the West Philippine Sea and the results?
Well, the process for securing that area was in a way simpler because it was really science-based, and we were fortunate that in that side of the Philippines, there were really no other claimants. No? With respect to the West Philippine Sea, as you know, that one is like a full-blown powder keg of disputes. So that one is really a lot harder. We also have actually a potential claim to a similar area of the seabed in the West Philippine Sea. And despite our recommendations to two previous administrations of Aquino and Duterte, no action was taken on our recommendations to also establish our claim there. We've made the same recommendations to the current administration, and we're awaiting their decision.
You mentioned earlier that filing claims in an arbitration tribunal is only one of the methods that you can use. What type of other methods would you recommend?
We need to be able to assert for ourselves and by ourselves these rights and entitlements we're claiming. Right now, the things that we are doing, such as conducting the patrols, deploying the Coast Guard and the Navy, encouraging our fishermen to fish, giving them assistance as they do that in the West Philippine Sea, those are the right steps. And standing up to China and its pressuring and bullying in that area is also the correct step. We need to show that we're serious about enforcing our rights and entitlements. Because after all, that's what our exclusive economic zone and continental shelf are for.
The Philippines has trade relations with China. How do you think that should be balanced with respect to the conflicts we have with China with respect to the West Philippine Sea?
Well, in the first place, I think that, again, compared to our Southeast Asian neighbors, we're a little bit better off. We're not as dependent on China. in terms of trade and industry. Our economies and linkages with other countries, with traditional partners like the US, Japan, Australia, they're much more diversified.
Do you think it's realistic to expect that our conflict with China can be resolved in this current administration?
I think the resolution of these disputes with China will take even longer. And that's why it's important to emphasize for our people that when it comes to our position and our posture in the West Philippine Sea, this has to cross political lines, because when we're faced with China, it doesn't matter whether it's a Marcos or Aquino or Duterte or what. There's only one country, one Philippines. Disputes like this necessarily take many decades, possibly even generations. And China knows that, and that's why it feels confident that it can outweigh the Philippines. Under the previous administration, China was able to achieve major inroads to the point that they're claiming now to conduct law enforcement as close as 50 nautical miles from Pangasinan. Two things have been seriously affected by this. The fisheries, of course, and that's why now our fishermen in the coastal areas are really hard up. The second is with respect to energy. Because of China's activities, our energy development plans, especially for offshore petroleum, have stalled for a decade now, and our own economic development will be hostage to China's whims. Many people will have heard by now about proposals to launch another litigation before another UNCLOS tribunal. But you have several other options. No? Everything from fact-finding to calling on China to make a report before the international community to lobbying essentially with international organizations. So that's why I think this is something that the government should consider even before deciding on whether or not to file a case. No?
Professor J, any final advice as to what the government should be doing or anything that we're overlooking that can be done right now in order to help us progress?
Well, right now, I think government needs to seriously consider how to really integrate all their efforts. What it needs is really careful coordination of moves between all these different departments so that they can all speak with one voice, especially vis-a-vis China on these disputes, and act as one, really.
We are really grateful to have you here today.
Welcome, Karen, and as I said, I'm happy to be here, and I hope that I'm able to contribute.
Again, that is Professor J. Bakal, and I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno, and this is The Way Forward. When we return, we discuss the blue economy and the law of the sea with Professor Ronald Mendoza.
PRRM has spent over 7 decades in rural development. We were biased in favor of farmers, and the fisherfolk told us, food is not just rice, it is also fish. The Philippines is more than 300,000 square kilometers of land. Our exclusive economic zone is 2.2 million square kilometers. We are the 15th largest fishing nation in the world. The Philippines is a maritime and archipelagic nation, or MANA. Mana natin ito. We must defend it.
This is The Way Forward. Professor Ronald Mendoza is a governance and institutional reform specialist with over 25 years of experience in development policy and public administration reforms. He is presently a senior economist with the Ateneo Policy Center. Professor Ron Mendoza, welcome to The Way Forward.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
The Philippines has a larger coastline than, for example, large economies like the United States or China. But in your paper on the blue economy, you state that despite the Philippines' advantage in terms of its vast marine resources and favorable geographical location, it has not been able to fully realize its maritime potential. Could you expound on the challenges faced by the Philippines in terms of realizing its full potential with the blue economy?
Right now, nahihirapan po tayong palakihin, palaguin yung mga investments, foreign investments going into the country. At kailangan po natin humabol sa iba pang mga bansa sa ASEAN. For instance, kung mag-i-invest ka sa fisheries, kung saan po pinapanganak yung mga isda, hindi po siya same area kung saan hina-harvest yung mga isdang yan. At dapat yung mangingisda natin, sila yung mga kakampi natin dyan. Kasi kung naiintindihan na nila yung pinanggagalingan ng natural resources na ina-harvest nila, maiintindihan din nila na kailangan protektahan nila yung mga coral reefs, yung mga natural resources para continuous yung pag-harvest natin.
China has been massively destroying coral reefs within the Philippines, So what do you think should be the approach of the Philippines when it comes to ensuring the protection of maritime resources, but also perhaps balancing that with the policies on a geopolitical level?
Philippines is sitting on some of the richest natural resources, the Coral Triangle, which a big chunk of that area is in Philippine EEZ and Philippine territory. So we have a large responsibility to take care of it, not just for our own food security, but for the regional food security.
Would you say that engaging even other countries like the United States or European nations in terms of investing in the protection side is something that can be done, or is it possible? It's a mechanism that should be explored?
Yes, in fact, I think we should engage all countries interested in protecting our natural resources, ensuring that we follow very sustainable ways of developing the marine economy.
Currently, what are the assigned values, or at least the estimated values of these resources?
Ito yung mga coral reefs, mangroves, all of this. And we estimated the net present value of anywhere from about $970 billion to $1.4 trillion in net present value. Would you believe right now there's a lot of wastage in fisheries caught? I believe the estimate is something like 20 to 30% wasted. But I have to believe the logistics and the cold storage is a big sort of consideration. One of the biggest poverty rates in the country in terms of sectors is the fisher folk. 31% poverty. Isa sa bawat tatlong fisherman ay mahirap. In fact, between 2018 and 2021, nag-increase pa yung poverty ng fisher folk.
Professor Ron, in your paper on the blue economy, you mentioned perhaps forming a Department of Marine Resources.
Mahalaga yung innovation ng Department of Maritime or Department of Blue Economy in several ways. Indonesia has such a ministry, and it is able to effect collective action across different fronts that need to take place almost simultaneously in order to achieve what you want to achieve.
Okay, so for example, without talking about forming a new department, what other policy initiatives do you think might work? Like, for example, in China, they have this cabbage strategy or the salami strategy to grow their economy.
What they, in effect, describe is an effort by China na unti-unti nilang i-advance yung interest nila. And in fact, the incremental advancement of their interests is such that they're willing to back off if there is counter pressure. But if you add up all of these incremental gains that they manage over time, ang laki na pala nung territory na solidify nila at na-capture
And this
nila.
is the salami strategy?
This is the salami strategy. Kaya parang sinaslice niya unti-unti yung problema. And each slice is not enough to provoke a robust response from us and from the allies, right? But one way to overcome it perhaps is to do partnerships. Partnerships with civil society, partnerships with the private sector, with our development and defense partners. The more partnerships you have, the more stable what we're trying to build is, and the more long-term looking our strategy will be. The other aspect of it is transparency.
We were able to get a favorable ruling from The Hague in terms of the UNCLOS and our sovereignty and our territorial rights within the West Philippine Sea. Considering that the Philippines has this democratic point of view, respect for rule of law, China now has apart from the 9-dash line, the 10-dash line, these are so different points of view, right?
We have find ways to cooperate even as we have disagreements. And in fact, there's enough shared interests in this area. You know, a huge chunk of international trade goes through some of these, areas. And so therefore, even as far away as Europe and obviously the United States, they have interests in the area too. So I do think that there must be some way to focus on areas for cooperation, and then continue some of the economic transactions that actually drive growth in Southeast Asia and in Asia and the world more generally. These are all shared interests. It is in no one's interest to actually stop this or disturb it or diminish it. The UNCLOS ruling is a very strong victory, not just for the Philippines, but for all of the stakeholders who are looking for some way to resolve these disputes in a way that actually takes us away from conflict, right? And so therefore, it's even though we appear to be on the winning side of that decision, I think that's the way I would look at the UNCLOS decision. Is it actually puts a very, very useful card on our pocket that is already a victory in terms of our side.
On that note, recently there have been reports of China vessels using water cannons against Philippine vessels. So that, I think, is a big sign that there's no cooperation or no recognition of the favorable arbitral ruling in favor of the Philippines.
Well, I think we're on a good track right now. Our government is at least strengthening partnerships, but also not alienating China and making sure that we do have those areas for cooperation. If we strengthen our national security infrastructure, our stance, we not only protect our fisher folk, but we also send a signal that we are serious about protecting our sovereignty. We must, as one nation, assert our rights in these areas. And a nation that is united is much more difficult to deal with than a nation that is divided.
Thank you again, Professor Ronald Mendoza. We certainly learned a lot from your extensive knowledge and experience.
My pleasure, Karen.
I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno, and this is The Way Forward. When we return, we discuss the challenges faced by Filipino fishermen with Kalayaan Sangguniang Bayan member Eugenio Bitoonon.
Yung West Philippine Sea naman, matagal na namang inaangkin ng Pilipinas. Kaya mas sinasabi namin, kami mga isda, atin pa rin yung West Philippine Sea. Hindi yung atin na, inaagaw pa rin nila. Pero pag tayo naman yung papasok, hindi naman nila payagan. Kaya malaking problema to sa usapin ng Pilipinas.
This is The Way Forward. Councilor Eugenio Bitoonon is an alumnus of Philippine Union College, now Adventist University of the Philippines, with a degree of Bachelor of Science in Biology. In 2010, he was elected mayor and served until 2016. He was given a chance to present extensive plans for the West Philippine Sea in the Pentagon, United States in 2015. Councilor June, thank you for joining us at The Way Forward.
Salamat din po sa inyong paanyaya.
What were your experiences living in these islands? Because a lot of us always hear about the West Philippine Sea, but a lot of Filipinos don't know the living conditions in these islands.
Among the 9 features of Kalayaan, walang civilian, puro sundalo lang. Gubat pa noon. Very rich yung mga tidal flat. After more than 20 years, iba na. Medyo kailangan nang pumunta sa malayo-layo.
You mean, mas
Para
mahirap nang
mag-fish, oo.
kumuha ng pagkain. But currently, nag-improve na po ba yung conditions?
Sa pag-asa lang po, malaki ang pinagbago compared nung kahit na nitong nakalipas na mga 10 years. And then may kuryente na rin po ngayon.
Sa
24
Pag-asa
hours
Island.
po, mayroon kasing napokor.
But for the rest of the Kalayaan Islands po, yung ibang areas, wala pang...
Ganun ang sitwasyon. Mahirap, walang tubig, wala siyang potable groundwater. Sa pag-asa lang meron. Ang Kalayaan Island ay napakalawak. Mayroon kasing basihan tayo, yung Presidential Decree 1596. Pag ni-drawing natin yung jurisdiction ng Kalayaan sa map, ay it will form a hexagon. Ang hindi lang po magandang sitwasyon yan at yung reality, yung kalahati niyan base sa aking pagtanaw, naokupa na po ng iba-ibang bansa. Mayroon yung China, lately pumasok yung reclamation na 7. At yung kanilang 7, yung 3 doon ay 550 hectares ang sinukat ko sa mapa. May military grade airport Pwedeng mag-land yung jumbo jet. Nung napabalita yung Scarborough in 2012, April, sabi ko, siguro sa Kalayaan, baka isunod nila yan, pangharas nila. Hindi nga ako nagkamali. Kasi April yon and then October, bumiyahe ako. Maiden voyage ng Queen Seagull. Malaki yung lansa namin na yan. Tumawag sa akin, sir, sabi niya, mayroong paparating na barko, napakabilis. Tinatawagan namin sa Marine Band, hindi sumasagot. Sabi ko, baka inchik, hindi marunong mag-English. Pagtingin ko sa labas na ganyan, warship number 995. Sumigaw ako sa mga kasama ko, kako, video, camera. Yung takbo namin papunta sa west, itong warship na padating, perpendicular Natakot ako kasi kung makross niya yung line, babaligtad yung dalawang vessel namin. Habang naghahanap ako ng aking ding camera at nag-request ako sa mga kasama ko na i-video, pagtingin ko sa lancha namin, pumihit na siya ng direksyon. Kasi kung hindi siya pumihit, ang laking disgrasya noon. And then, hanggang doon sa Pag-asa, kahit na 5 miles away na lang kami sa Pag-asa, kinikross-cross kami, binubuntutan kami. So, parang naging palaisipan sa akin, sabi ko, bakit sa sarili nating teritoryo hinaharas tayo at saka parang pinapatrolyahan pa tayo sa sarili nating teritoryo. While passing by Mischief Reef about 5 miles away towards Ayungin, kasi ang distance ng Mischief Reef to Ayungin is about 24 nautical miles. We were stream wind lights. We were tailed by an unidentified vessel for about 2 hours. Then when we passed by Ayungin, bago lang nag-stop. And then naisip ko, sabi ko, bakit may mga ganitong incidents in my own territory, in my own jurisdiction?
Nagkaroon po tayo ng favorable ruling with the UNCLOS Arbitral Award. But recently, there was still another water cannon incident.
Today, if you stand on the shore of Pag-asa, you can count as much as 30 to 50 boats na naka-anchor just about 3 to 5 kilometers away. And there's a patrolling China Coast Guard vessels. Kiniklaim nila na yung buong South China Sea ay kanila. The Reed Bank, pag nakuha ng China yung buong South China Sea, they will not import oil for 5 years. And they will not import natural gas for 105 years. Ang analysis ko ay they're really trying to enforce yung 9 dash line map nila. If we have a Scarborough in Luzon near Zambales, we have 6 of that in Kalayaan. I heard the senators saying about 100 million for Ayungin. Pero paningin ko ganito hindi lang basta't military option. Tapos sa Ayungin ganun din Ang idea ko sana, 3 components. Mayroong research station na talagang naka-on-site base na continuing research and monitoring. Tapos mayroon tayong investment. Mga reefs natin, ito mga features, pag-aralan siya, paano gawin siyang marine park na nakasunify siya into zones na no-take at saka yung pwedeng paglagyan ng mga sea farms. The way to control and manage all the features that are left to us is to occupy. Kailangan posisyonan natin, occupy natin siya.
Thank you so much, Councilor June. Your extensive experience really, I think, gives very pragmatic solutions that can be applied by our government. So I hope that we see some progress in the West Philippine Sea, thanks to people like you with insights.
Salamat din sa inyong imbitasyon.
I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno, and this is The Way Forward. When we return, we discuss the food value chain with Department of Trade and Industry Secretary Alfredo Pascual.
Ang dalangin po ng bawat Pilipino dito sa ating bansa na wag naman po tayong perwisyo ng ibang bansa. Yun po ay sa tulong ng ating presidente, magkaroon po tayo ng alerto yung mga nanunungkulan doon na ginagawa ng Chinese. Ang lugar ng Pilipinas ay protektahan at sa mga nanunungkulan na sila ay tulungan ng Panginoon na magkaroon po sila ng lakas ng loob na masawata po talaga yun. Dahil doon lang po naasa ang mga Pilipino.
This is The Way Forward. In July 2022, Alfredo Pascual became the Philippines Trade and Industry Secretary. He served at 4 esteemed national and international institutions: the Institute of Corporate Directors as President and CEO, in the University of the Philippines System as President, CEO, and Co-Chair, and in the Asian Development Bank as Division Director and Advisor, and Asian Institute of Management as Finance Professor. Secretary Fred Pascual, welcome to The Way Forward.
Thank you. It's a privilege to have a conversation with you.
So what role does data have when it comes to developing the blue economy?
Data are critical. The advantage now is that we can accelerate the gathering, the collection of data, and the management and analysis of data because of the rapid developments in information technology.
What do you think are initiatives that can be undertaken when it comes to the blue economy to achieve economies of scale?
What comes to mind, for example, is organizing fisher folks into cooperatives so they can move together rather than being a lonely fisherman in the ocean.
When it comes to the blue economy, are there certain incentives that are targeted towards increasing investments?
Many of the industries that are related to the blue economy are listed in our what's called SIPP, Strategic Investment Priority Plan. If it's really innovative and large investment, you can have longer tax holiday. Under the SIPP, there are 3 tiers, and first tier will be lower set of incentives, and as you go to the tier 3, there will be longer tax holiday, and then there are shifts in additional benefits later on.
I'm going to shift a bit to geopolitics. And the conflict with China has been witnessed in terms of encounters in the West Philippine Sea. Has this affected the trade and industry aspect when it comes to the blue economy and our marine sector?
Well, we continue to maintain our trade relations with China. China is our number one trading partner. We say the totality of our relations, the relations between the Philippines and China it's not just the conflict in West Philippine Sea.
That's very comforting to hear. And when it comes to the decision obtained by the Philippines from the arbitral tribunal at The Hague, does this ruling by that arbitral tribunal relating to the UNCLOS have any effect on or relevance to trade and industry, particularly with other instruments like the RCEP or the Philippine Export Development Plan?
RCEP is very important trade agreement that opens the Chinese market to the Philippine manufacturers. One component of the Export Development Plan is to attract manufacturers from other countries like Japan, Korea, to set up their manufacturing hub in the Philippines and use that hub for serving the export markets around the region, including China.
Well, Secretary Fred, you have really given so much insights. Is there any final message that you want to share with us, particularly about the initiatives of the Department of Trade and Industry?
Well, in the Department of Trade and Industry, we continue to exert efforts to bring in investments. We are helping entrepreneurs to develop businesses, making use of our marine resources, from setting up resorts to fisheries, to exploiting by bigger companies our mineral resources underwater, and also availing of the renewable resources. We need people to go to business to be able to maximize the value we can generate from our resources.
Well, we look forward to all of these initiatives. But again, Secretary Fred, thank you so much for your time. That was Secretary Fred Pascual again of the Department of Trade and Industry. And I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno, and this is The Way Forward. The Philippines is a maritime archipelagic nation. The Philippines' exclusive economic zone covers an estimated 2.2 million square kilometers of water. In the West Philippine Sea, an estimated $3.3 trillion of trade passes annually. We sit with thought leaders who will give us their perspective on the law of the sea. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno, and this is The Way Forward.
PRRM has spent over 7 decades in rural development. We were biased in favor of farmers, and the fisherfolk told us, food is not just rice, it is also fish. The Philippines is more than 300,000 square kilometers of land. Our exclusive economic zone is 2.2 million square kilometers. We are the 15th largest fishing nation in the world. The Philippines is a maritime and archipelagic nation, or MANA. Mana natin ito. We must defend it.
The Philippines is a maritime archipelagic nation. The Philippines' exclusive economic zone covers an estimated 2.2 million square kilometers of water. In the West Philippine Sea, an estimated $3.3 trillion of trade passes annually. Next week, we sit with thought leaders who will give us their perspective on climate change and food security. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno, and this is The Way Forward.